We've all heard it. You've got to learn to sit with your emotions. But what the heck does that actually mean? Today we're going to break that down. We're going to talk about what it actually means to sit with your emotions, how sometimes your emotions get stuck, and what to do when that happens. My name is Sean. I'm a mental health coach. I see 40 plus clients a week. I have a 98% satisfaction score from over 1,400 ratings, and I help clients get results like this. I've learned a lot about handling my emotions, balancing work and life, and improving my people skills. I didn't used to know how to regulate my emotions, and through coaching, I've become more aware of my feelings and know better how to process them. Let's start with what the heck sitting with your emotions actually is, which is actually a bundled term. It means a term that has so many different meanings that it ends up not meaning anything. So I'm going to use an analogy of the physical body to illustrate how our emotions work. So first, think about the circulatory system, how you have blood flowing all throughout the veins that are all throughout your body. And emotions work the same way, where they sort of flow throughout our body and then over time they exit our body. And the vast majority of input and emotions actually flow in and flow right back out. So if you think about driving down the road, there's all sorts of input that you're taking in, but you don't remember most of it, right? It's just sort of like passively there and then it passes through. There are even things that help emotions to flow through the body more easily. So things like sleep. Most of us have had the experience where we are really upset the night before and we go to sleep and we wake up feeling better because it has sort of been flushed through our system. Second is crying. So sometimes if you are really, really upset about something and you have a good cry about it, it makes you feel better. You feel lighter at the end of it because it has passed through your system. And finally, talking to somebody about it. So if you are feeling really down and you have a conversation with a friend or a coach or a therapist, which, by the way, if you do want to have a free, no pressure conversation where you talk about something that's bothering you, I'll leave a link down in the description so that we can talk about that. But that also helps us to feel better. We get it off our chest and we feel better at the end of it. So the concept of sitting with your emotions is actually very simple, which is that if you sit literally and wait, the emotion will eventually pass. And that is because emotions naturally fluctuate. Emotions naturally flow in and out of our system. And so by just waiting, that flow will naturally happen. That fluctuation will naturally happen. Eventually, the emotion will eventually pass. Most of the time. Because sometimes I work with clients and they have had emotions stuck in their system for years. So what's going on there? So you know that analogy that I was talking about of driving down the road and you're taking in all this input, but most of it just sort of flows right out? Well, imagine for a second that then as you're driving down the road, a car crash happens. And all of a sudden, all of your focus is on that one thing. And when you get home, you're still talking about, oh my gosh, honey, I saw this horrible, scary car crash on the way home. And it sticks with you, right? And that is an example of something sort of getting clogged in the system. Rather than it flowing through like it normally does, instead, it sort of calcifies in our system and blocks the flow of things. So this is what happens, is some big emotion gets clogged in our emotional circulatory system and isn't able to flow through. And this can happen in a couple of ways. Either because there is some really big traumatic event that happens to us, and so that event itself is big enough to sort of clog the passage, or lots of little events add up over time that all share a similar theme or pattern. And they sort of layer on top of each other until eventually they're so thick that they can no longer pass through the system. So a good example of this that I see with a lot of people that I work with is that their parents, intentionally or not, made them feel like they needed to perform in order to be loved. So they needed to get that A, or they needed to do their chores in order to be loved. That if they didn't do those things, then they were bad and wrong. And by having that reinforced over and over and over again, it becomes a blockage in their system that stays with them. So that now whenever they don't perform, it brings up all sorts of horrible, horrible feelings that are much bigger than what it is that they are actually dealing with in the moment. So then the natural question becomes, okay, this hopefully makes sense. So how do I unlodge something from my emotional circulatory system? I have another great body analogy for this. You know how sometimes if you do something like twist your ankle, it will swell up, right? And the reason that it swells up is because your body is actually trying to help. It's sending a whole bunch of blood to your ankle to try to heal it. But this also has negative consequences in doing things like limiting our mobility. So what the doctor has to do is they actually have to go in and reduce the swelling. They have to sort of fight against the body's natural instincts, because even though the body is trying to help itself, it is actually causing some problems for it. And the same thing is true in our emotional system. When something gets clogged in our emotional circulatory system, the reason why is because our body is trying to protect us. So for instance, when we see that car crash, it is actually very good that it sort of gets lodged in our system and we are very alert and careful of it in case there's, more danger going forward. The problem is that then if, we are safe from the car crash and we do not pass that, then we start to get triggered over all, we can't go driving anymore because we're so afraid of the car crash. And so the way that we unclog that emotion from our emotional circulatory system is by starting to teach our mind that it is okay. A lot of people would refer to this as like exposure therapy. Essentially, you are going to take little tiny steps that feel uncomfortable but safe in showing yourself that when this thing happens, it is actually okay. So to use the example of a person that feels like they need to perform again, if you feel like you need to perform in order to be good enough, doing little tiny things where you don't go 110%, where you don't put in every fiber of your being into everything that you do and make it absolutely perfect. And instead you put in 80%, 90%, and you see what happens. And a lot of times what happens is that things are actually pretty okay. And by doing that over and over and over again, your system starts to relearn. Your system starts to recondition itself to learn, oh, it's actually okay. I don't need to fear this anymore. And little bits of it pass. Little bits of that clogged artery pass over and over and over again until eventually it's cleared out and emotions can flow easily through it once again. So I have 3 things that you can do to help with this. Thing number 1 is next time you feel an emotion that is bothering you, sit with it. Just literally sit down and wait. And what you'll find is that a lot of times it will just naturally pass. Your mind will move to something else. The emotion will naturally fluctuate. Will naturally flow out of your system. The second thing that I want you to do is to identify clogs that you have in your system. And you'll know clogs by the length of time that they have been in your system. If it is something that has persistently bothered you over the course of a long period of time, that is a clog. And then once you've identified the clogs, then I want you to go through this process that we talked about of exposure therapy, where you slowly but surely start to take actions that feel uncomfortable but safe in the direction of reteaching your system that, hey, this is actually something that is okay. To give you some other examples other than the achievement one, another good example is if you are a people pleaser and you feel guilty over saying no. Say no to something really small and see what happens. Or if you have a large fear of being rejected in relationships or being vulnerable, share something really tiny and see what happens. If you want to do a quick check-in on your mental health, there's a free 2-minute quiz where you can get some quick insights into areas that you might want to focus on. I'll leave a link down in the description. And if you've tried things like therapy and nothing has helped your emotions to pass, this video is all about, it'll either appear here or down in the description, it's all about what to do when therapy doesn't work. I hope this was helpful and I'll see you later. Bye!